to when we are recording, and if Diane's not on the line, I can send her the recording. So that's
perfect.
That helps. It's all yours, Elizabeth.
Okay. So additions and corrections to the agenda. As you just said, David, we will be having executive session today. Public participation. Is there any member of the public who would like to talk about something not related to today's agenda?
Elizabeth, sorry to interrupt. It's Tiffany. We just barely received an email resignation just before the meeting, so we should add that to the agenda.
Okay, thank you. I haven't seen that, so okay. Announcements and celebratory comments from board members. Does anybody have anything they'd like to? Anybody have any announcements?
Elizabeth?
Yes. Amy, is that you?
Yeah, it is, but hearing all kinds of echoes too, because everyone has
Okay. Could everybody who is not talking at the moment mute yourselves until you're ready to talk? That you can do that by pressing Command D.
Okay. I'll try this.
Can you hear me all right now, Amy?
It's never mind. I'm not going to talk.
Okay. If everybody who is not talking at the moment could mute themselves by pressing Command D, that would be very helpful.
Control D, or you can, if you're on the phone, stop.
Okay. Yep. Yes. If you're on the phone, please hit star six. Okay. Does anybody have any announcements or celebratory comments? You may unmute yourself to make announcements or celebratory comments. Since we last met, we had lots of appreciation days, and I just wanted to call out some of the people who have had official appreciation days, such as teachers who've been doing a fantastic job, principals who people can rely on because they are who they are. Our nurses have been working very hard. I'm trying to think who else. I think that's it. Principals. Oh, administrative assistants have been doing a phenomenal job as well. Okay, that's it. Those are my celebratory comments. Okay, moving on. Discussion possible action items. The first up is the COVID-19 update. But maybe, David, we can start with the soft ending of the school year.
Yeah, so I don't know why I'm getting feedback here. Are you all getting that feedback? No, maybe not. All right, that's better. Thumbs up, everybody can hear me, right? We're good? Thumbs up? Yep, thumbs up. All right, good. Yeah, so things are and I'll get into that soft end of year close in just a second, but essentially all other pieces are a steady go. You know, I've had the opportunity to sit in on pod meetings with teachers. I've had the opportunity to sit in on a couple of classrooms. It's really fascinating to watch the kids no matter what age. The other day I was on with a group of second graders, how they navigate the computer, how they know sometimes better than adults how to mute themselves and when to speak and when not to speak. It's kind of fun to see all of that. So I think along the same lines as Elizabeth's sharing, I think the teachers and kids and families have been doing a great job. So I really think that's been outstanding. We also continue with the food service program and still serving between, I think we're up to 750 or more, lunches. There's some indication that we will continue that program even once school is out, but that's going to take some waivers from the child nutrition program and the AOE in order to continue it in a similar fashion to the way we're continuing it now. Normally in the summer, you have what's called congregate meals, which means you have one site and people come to that site. The state had waived that congregate requirement, so that's why we can deliver the meals now. We could still deliver to a couple of central sites, but we're working on that with the powers to be, and so is Craig. We do have some new hiring to do with food service heading into the summer, but not for right now. We're fully staffed, and Craig feels he's got everything he needs equipment wise. Still, of course, there's ordering of packaging and food, but essentially that's all going well. We've got three things to focus on now going forward. One is, as Elizabeth said, year-end close and what that's going to look like, how we're going to close the year. The second one is summer school and whether there'll be any form of summer school. And that could be summer school for regular education or summer school for special education students. For special education students, sometimes that's referred to as extended school year services, ESY. And then the third thing we have to think about going forward is the next year's opening, whether that's a remote opening, what they're calling a soft opening, or a hard opening where we're back to normal. But I think we should deal with the immediate first. I think Elizabeth's right, and that's how we want to close out the school year. I've been having meetings with administrators, with teachers. I get emails daily from parents, so I always use those emails as an opportunity to kind of run this idea by those parents and see what they think. But anyhow, the plan or the idea that was presented was based on area discussions with area superintendents and sort of trying to take the letter of the law around needing to follow our calendar and to be able to get creative with what that might look like. I would say 1 out of the 3 emails I get from parents, if not daily, every other day, really kind of asking politely and professionally, how long we're going to go, when this is going to end. They're finding they're getting a little tired of it. Their kids are getting a little tired of it. So here's the proposed plan. The proposed plan is to for seniors, because they're critical anyhow, and they always end a little bit early. But with seniors would be to have their last day be May 29th. We would waive final exams for seniors. Matter of fact, we want to waive final exams for all high school students at this point. We just don't find the environment or conducive to a final exam that would have, any level of integrity to it right now. But anyhow, seniors would be done on the 29th. We'd use the week after that as sort of a fix and finish week for seniors. They'd be cleaning up any work that needed to be done. Those who needed to meet standards still for graduation purposes, they needed to finish work, turn in projects. Teachers would keep in touch with them, obviously, throughout that following week. And then we would wrap that up on June 5th with our seniors. For our underclassmen, and I use that term loosely, that would be for our preschool through grade 11. What we're thinking about is going into the following week and making the soft stop on June 5th for all students who are caught up with their work, who have met the standards, and have accomplished, because teachers were directed under Angie's leadership to, to identify several standards that they wanted to accomplish. Obviously, not quite as much as they would normally accomplish, but they did lay those out in plans to Angie and in plans to the kids. If kids have finished those standards, have got all their work in, their projects complete, again, no final exams, we would have their last day be June 5th. But then we have several kids, many kids some who have fallen through the cracks, some who aren't turning in work, some who are struggling with the work in a remote environment. And even with all of the interventions, we've been struggling with them. We would carry them into the following week up until at least June 12th. And those kids would be finishing projects, finishing work, and sort of completing the year. We did have 3 snow days, which would actually throw us into the following week. But my colleagues are saying that, they're not, then again, they're all contemplating some sort of a soft closing like this, but they're still, awaiting some direction on those snow days. But we would continue working with those students that needed that help right through till, I think we'd use that snow day as the last day, which on our calendar would be June 17th. So what I would like to do, and I sent a draft to Angie and Larry tonight just to clean it up and edit it. What I'd like to do is send out a letter with that proposal to our parents in the next day or two, and I'd like to put in that letter a link to a survey, and I'd like to ask parents what they feel about that soft close plan, and if they support that. And I would also, there are a couple of other questions we want to ask in the survey. One question about food service. Would you continue with food service if it was not door-to-door delivery, but central locations in your towns where you could pick up the food? And Angie's got those questions. She's our survey queen. She'll be linking those for me, and all the data will go back to her and I, so we'll get a sense of that. The third question we want to ask them is around summer school in the current COVID-19 environment, where we have to maintain social distancing, wear masks, wash up on a regular basis. Would parents be willing to send their students to a school building for summer services under those conditions, just to get a sense of where parents are what they're feeling right now? I think that feedback would be good. I know that I still struggle in this. We won't talk about this tonight, but talking about summer school and an opening next year, I still struggle if we're still at a 10 or a 20 benchmark for students, and we're having to social distance and keep 6 feet apart. We're having to wear masks, students and staff. If we're having to sterilize rooms, if we're having to, wash hands, every half hour to an hour, I just still, and I say this in my letter to parents, I still wonder how we would orchestrate and manage and control that. It just, the whole thing does not compute in my head, but that's a later conversation and a later discussion. Having worked with kids of all ages all my life, I just can't. It's difficult enough to get all adults to buy into these social distancing conditions. So anyhow, that's it, and I'll take any comments. Elizabeth asked certainly that we have this conversation tonight about that plan. I don't want to wait and go to every single board with this, just because the SU board meeting is not until the end of May, and I've got staff and parents who are chomping at the bit to know what the end of the year is going to look like. Can you see the hands, Elizabeth? I see Bill's hand up.
I don't see Bill's hand up, but Bill?
Bill, go ahead. I can tell you, Elizabeth.
My first question is there's been no guidance from the AOE about shortening the legal requirements for 175 days. So to shorten the school year, you'd have to apply for a waiver.
Yeah, well, I think if we did that, first of all, we would remember we're in sort of that 50% modality where we've already applied for a waiver. Elizabeth asked me that the other day. We had to do a general waiver that basically, talked about, like you said, Bill, 175 days, but of at least 50% attendance. And again, I'm not saying that, we wouldn't offer any student that wanted to continue, but in a standards-based environment, it's more or less when you finished, and then even when we're in school, that those last few days can be, usually that's when you're doing, field day and,
Right.
the class parties, and you're taking your end of the year field trip. So I could argue with anybody that if we did this soft landing, we'd still be in school, we'd still be teaching, we'd still have students in front of us. And I could certainly, reach out to the agency once we get to that point where I think parents think it's a good idea or are willing to support it, and see what the agency thinks about it. But they have not, other than to say, follow your calendar, they haven't given any clear.
Right, which means that we have to follow our calendar. So basically, the way it works, David, is that there's no waiver for the 50%. The only waiver that the AOE put out there was that a waiver for attendance days before March 18th. That's the only waiver that was out there. And so the law is still in effect. You have to have 50% present for it to count as an attendance day. And a student to be present has to make contact with an instructional teacher at least once during a school day. So,
well, I don't think that's completely true though, Bill, because we got guidance.
Actually it is, David. That is
we
true.
got
That is actually the law. That is what I got from the AOE. To count as a present day, a student has to make some sort of contact with an instructional person, and it can be
does not have to be a teacher though.
Right.
Does not have to be a teacher. You said a teacher.
Yes, some school staff.
Some staff member, right.
Some staff member. It does not have to be a classroom teacher, but it does have to be someone who is applying some level of instruction or an administrator. So
it does not say instruction. It says there has to be some level of contact on a daily basis from a school staff member, right? And I'm not saying that we would stop contact after the end of the school year. In other words, we have people right now on a daily basis who are contacting students, checking in, and that would continue. That would absolutely continue.
But how would you get 50% of your students doing that if you're not running instructional periods?
Because it would be new learning, new instruction, new assignments, and that stuff that for all those kids who have met the standard, who have completed those assignments, right? Then we would just go back to making sure that we check in with them, we contact them, we continue to, provide the option for, enrichment work or whatever. I mean, I'm saying new learning, new instruction, new assignments for those kids who have completed it all could stop on June 5th rather than June 12th.
Then what? If so, that's going to be a majority of your students, though. More than 50%. So they stop.
Oh, I don't know about that. At the middle school and high school, and Tiffany, you can speak to this. At the middle school, at the high school, I know we're still having trouble, and I'm not talking about seniors. Seniors are a separate issue, and certainly you can make comments about that. We've always let our seniors out early, even prior to this year. But even with our high school students, non-seniors, and our middle school students, we're hearing that there are anywhere from up to 50% of the kids who are not turning in work, have missed work, are missing assignments. it's it's a concern. Not so much grades K through 6. That gets better at as you get down lower into the grades. But it's a fair number of students who are missing work.
Okay, but David, you still haven't answered the question, how are you going to get around 175 days with having 50% attendance? You just can't.
Because the guidance that we had from I think it was on March 21st. This was after or getting ready for the continuity of learning plan. The guidance we had was that you had to make some form of contact, right? Like you said, you're absolutely right, on a daily basis. But you did not have to be teaching lessons and doing instruction every single day with a licensed teacher. And what I'm saying is there would be a way to maintain that contact during that week of June, whatever it would be, the week of June 7th. Because we have every single student has been assigned to a support staff member or a BCBA or a BI, and they're reaching out to them daily.
Okay, so let me try to clarify here. After June 5th, if you have ended school, then how are you going to count those as school days? That's my confusion.
No. We would be checking in for attendance purposes with those kids who have finished all of their work during that week. That was my plan, because we're doing that now.
After June 5th, what's the last day of school? What is 175 days?
175 days, including the 3 snow days. If we include the 3 snow days, would be June. It's a Wednesday. I think it's June 17th. Does anybody have that? Let me look in the calendar. Hold on. Yeah, June 17th. So that would give us about a week and a half for doing some of that, that catch-up work for kids who really are struggling right now.
Okay, so my confusion, David, comes in. Why are you calling it ending school on June 5th when why not just say that we're going to be working on work catch-up and checking in with children and continue going to school? Why call it that we're ending?
Well, maybe, and again, I sent the draft to Angie and Larry today, and we can certainly to be honest with you, I don't have that right in front of me now, but maybe there is a different way to word that maybe it would be fix and finish, a week of fix and finish, right? So that, because that's essentially the way we're looking at it, right? We're looking at it as a week, because right now on Fridays, we're doing 4 days of instruction, Monday through Thursday, across all 4 schools. And on Friday, it's supposed to be fix and finish Friday. So we're just trying to elongate that into the end of the year so that some of these kids who are struggling can have a little bit of a softer landing. And maybe I just have to figure out a different way to word that, if you know what I mean.
David, Tiffany here. Sorry to interject. I just thinking from a middle and a high school lens, just so folks here are aware, that last week of school, which would be the week of the 12th, that's typically an exam week for students anyway, and they're not required to go all 5 days. So I just wanted you to know what it typically would look like if we were in session. We've decided not to have exams this year, but that fix and finish piece, based on what we know about student engagement right now, would be really, really beneficial for those students if they had access to something like that.
Tiffany,
I don't disagree with that. I'm on board completely with the fix and finish. I just think that if you announce that school ends on June 5th, it's going to end. You're not going to be able to get that 50% contact. Parents will zip out. Students will zip out. So David, I like what you're planning. I think the idea of it, of focusing on touching base and working with those kids that
Aren't finished.
need it, continuing it, but I don't think it would be productive for two reasons, and these are pretty important reasons. One reason is that students and parents are going to emotionally close out. The next reason is our teachers and our administrators, every staff member in the Windsor School has been working their butt off in this difficulty. And if it rolls out as a school is done, because early, I think there might be that perception that we're ending it early because what we're doing isn't any good. And I don't want that perception to be out there.
Yeah, well, maybe it's the way, because the way the administrative team has talked about it, and maybe we've got to, and we can look at that letter again tomorrow, Angie, and just see whether, in light of this conversation, see what might need to be changed in there. But essentially what we were looking at was a model where, just like in a classroom, some kids, especially toward the end of the year, they finish work early, they're done. We have all kinds of special activities at the end of the year. We're just trying to kind of honor that same kind of situation where instead of it's sort of a reverse, it's kind of like that, flip the classroom in more of a large estate, that we want to make sure we have an opportunity for kids to finish up, that we're still going to expect attendance. I guess I wasn't clear enough about that. Because I was just thinking about ways to do that just earlier this morning, that we're still going to have to make those phone calls and contact, how you doing? We've still got special education resources and needs. We've got over close to 25% to 30% of our kids are identified. Those services are not going to stop. Those kids, those resources, and all those services will continue. Katie knows that. We've talked about that. So I think those kids, and then the other regular ed kids who are struggling, I think it's going to be a fair number of kids. Some kids, no. Some kids we're just going to check in with, and we'll move on. But I think maybe it's that fix and finish piece that just needs to be clearer, rather than, new instruction stops as of that Friday. But,
right.
The workload, finishing your work, checking in with you to make sure the work is finished, that doesn't stop. Maybe that's to make that clearer.
I'll give my last pitch and let anyone else sort of chime in here. So everything you're saying about what you want to accomplish is I'm in dead agreement with David. I just don't think that you should include the message that there's going to be an early end to school, that on June 5th. I think try to accomplish all the goals that you want to, but don't put that message out that school will end on June 5th.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's
I understand that. Yep. I get it.
So that's my 2 cents.
And how about with seniors, Bill? The 29th, like Tiffany said, they would have been done anyhow. Graduation would have been, I think.
Yeah, I
not an issue.
No. I'm not worried about seniors. I think they're going to be checked out anyway. And if you take out the seniors, it's still going to be quite easy for you to hit that 50% attendance rate. No, I'm fine with everything you're trying to do, David. It's just, okay. I'm not okay with the message that the school is going to end on June 5th. I think there needs to be a better way to say it. Something like new instruction is going to end on June 5th. There's still going to be school, so forth and so on. And of course, as the weather is going to get better, you're going to get less engagement regardless. You do anyway.
I'm going to start forwarding you some of the emails that come into me.
Yeah.
People are ready for the end, believe me. Yeah. And I'm not talking about teachers. I'm talking about parents, who are almost, begging to stop this a little sooner. And thank God the weather has cooperated. I'm just, so worried about that first 80-degree, 90-degree day. And we've been blessed with this weather, but I think it's going to get.
That's an opportunity for those PE teachers to kick in and really make a difference.
Yeah. Well, I've even thought about with the end of that week. We have an administrative team meeting tomorrow where we're going to kind of try to finalize, the letter and the survey and all of that stuff. And that was one of the things I was going to propose. We could also during that week use it because that's what we would be doing during that week. There'd be, I remember we do Olympics, we do field day, we do, all kinds of things that are fun during that last week of school. So I was going to propose some of that as well. So I might have been too strong with that idea of school ends on the 5th. That's not what I was intending at all. And maybe we've just got to make sure that the communication is clear to parents so that they don't get that. Because I think in my letter, and I don't know, Angie, you might have it in front of you, but I think I even say that next week would be a fix and finish week, but maybe it wasn't clear enough. We can take care of that.
I'm looking at the text. For our students in grades pre-K 12, we would like to have a last day to be June 5th and use the following week and a half to support those students who still need to meet standards and have work to complete.
Okay,
so it's say something like,
fix and finish. We can clean that up.
Something to indicate that it's an deadline versus a
right. Well, I think the word we want to get in there is like we did when we were with Fridays, right? No new instruction, no new learning, just kind of getting the work done, getting it handed in, the final projects. Yeah, we can figure out a way to word that. Yeah.
Avoid that word last.
Yeah. We won't use the word last day of school. I mean, in a perfect world, I'd
school year early. I mean, my objection was saying that we're going to end the school year early. And we're going to, not only are we going to end it early, we're going to end it 2 weeks early. Well,
a week and a half, but you're right.
Thoroughly agree with ending the school year 2 weeks early.
Yeah.
A lot of times the teacher will, just so they can get their grades in, they assign things at the end of the year that they don't necessarily tell the students based on their age level in the group about, if this is going to be included in my grade or not. But so all the academics that are included in the final assessment and the final standards would be assigned by June 5th.
And Tiffany, I appreciate hearing that would have been the week for finals anyway. And so it sort of makes it makes it, it's all total. As a parent, I totally get it. And I mean, hooray. But, and I think it's a great idea to have, as Bill said, everything that you're saying is great. I just was worried about the precedent of ending the school year 2 weeks early and also ending the school year 2 weeks early without any real discussion about it.
And I don't think certainly, and this is meant in all due respect, I don't think we have to worry about precedent setting in this situation. I'm hoping and praying this is the last time that we have this kind of a pandemic. And I just think these are unusual and strange times, and they take incredibly, creative solutions to keep everybody sane and keep everybody, working and engaged. I think that's important. Our people are exhausted. They're exhausted. And I'm not talking about just teachers. I'm talking about parents and kids. And it's sort of like in a perfect world, we'll go back to school next year. But I don't see any scenario under which we're going to have 5-year-olds with masks on and keeping 6 feet apart. People are nuts who think that. And I've told that to the Agency of Education. I've told that to everybody I can get my voice to ear on. But you've got all these politicians and esoteric people and theoreticians who, want to please everybody. Let's be realistic here, right? And this has been a hard year for everybody. mostly the parents and the kids, quite frankly, and then the staff too. But I'm just trying to provide a little bit of relief. That's all. That's my only intent, and I wasn't necessarily, trying to, establish a precedent, or from now on we'll end 2 weeks early.
I get that. I do get that. But I don't think this is going to be, I mean, call me a cynic, but I don't think this is going to be the only time that this is the first time, but I don't think this is going to be the only time that we have something like this. And we want to be really careful about setting precedent. And that was my thing. Let's move on. Move. Okay.
Does anybody, while we're talking though about this, just quickly, and I know I don't want to drag this out, but does anybody have any strong feelings about summer school? Yeah, we have some kids who I'm sure who have regressed. I don't think there are as many as people think there might be out there. I wonder sometimes about regression and how that correlates to, direct instruction, but that's another whole story. But I mean, if we have to use separate entrances and march kids in 6 feet apart and have masks and are people understanding why I would rather not do it this summer? I mean, is that something that people can support that? I mean, I've only heard of one other district that's planning on trying something, and I'm not talking about special ed. Bill's hand is up.
I agree with you 100%, David. I think it's a horse that you don't ride right now.
And I know that they are opening childcares, but those are very small environments. They can figure that out. We've been told, our buildings for insurance purposes, need to remain closed, for general purposes. I got a call from the BTG who wanted to do a summer program with 30 or 40 kids this summer at Windsor. And I checked in with our insurance company. I basically just said, no, we really don't want to go there. Now, maybe the restrictions will open to 25 or 30, or maybe there'll be some other recommendations. But right now, that's how I'm feeling. So I think we're just going to say no to summer programming. If there are,
sorry, Tiffany, I have a question. Are we thinking we're going to say no to all summer programming? Because we have a teacher who received a grant to provide virtual summer programming through the Vermont Humanities Camp. It would be all online, not in contact. So that's something to consider. I know people are considering creative options that would allow them to, to use this virtual environment. So
no, that's
I think
fine.
you're going to be clear if there's no programs at all, or if there are
no, that's fine.
Programs, some types of programs that can still exist.
No, that's a good question.
Consideration is if it was a credit recovery.
Yeah,
that would be something that you probably would want to run.
Yeah, I was talking in person, and I was talking about large groups. Special education, they're going to be taught because they've got some certain federal requirements and state requirements. That's different, but they usually operate in very small groups, sometimes one-on-one, one-on-two. I mean, that stuff I can picture and I can visualize. It's really, I'm just talking about a summer school where we've got, 30, 40, 50 or more kids in all of our buildings. I just don't see it. But virtual, I think, Tiffany, that's fine. I have no problem with that.
David?
The title summer school program, to my knowledge at Windsor, was small groups with a Title I teacher.
Do you remember how many, Angie?
They may have had 20 to 25 kids, maybe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think once you surpass that limit of, yeah.
But it was not ever at the same time. So they, I think if I remember what the schedule looked like the most a kiddo would ever be there would be an hour or two. Does that sound right, Tiffany?
Yeah, and it was typically one-on-one situations or 3-to-1 situations.
Not more than that. It would,
Right.
And it was kindergarten, first, second, maybe a third or fourth grader, but mostly your primary age students.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could see some of that on a case by case basis, I think we'd have to go, because remember, you're also talking about sanitizing rooms, sterilizing rooms. I mean, if you look at those voucher requirements and they haven't even published them all yet. I mean, when they all get published, it's just, I don't know that we have the personnel to keep up with that, but we could look at that on a case by case basis. I was just talking about a general summer school like they sometimes run, or the BTG having 30 to 35 kids in there. I mean, I just don't want to assume that liability right now.
I think I saw on the paper or somewhere that they were opening day camps this summer.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how they do that. I'm just not sure. So you might be being more careful than you need to be. I just don't know.
Well, some of this too, some of it boils down to ethical standards to some degree, right? I mean, I think like they're certainly not making day camps open. They're allowing them to open if they can meet those guidelines, right? So if all of the campers stay masked and if all of the campers stay 6 feet apart, yeah, I remember that camp song way back when about I'm having a whole lot of fun here. Once it stops raining.
Hello, Mom.
I think sometimes it really is intuition. That's what makes me nervous. I think what you can do and what you should do with children, I think, are two different things. We've got a boarding school, and I don't want to digress here. And I know, Elizabeth, you want to move on. We have a boarding school in town here, St. Johnsbury Academy. One of the things they're thinking about next year is they would keep the day students at home remotely, and they would have the boarders. There's 250 of them come, but they couldn't leave campus from the time they stepped on until Christmas. So now you're talking about a 13 or 14-year-old who would be, and you did the private school stuff, Nancy, right? It's sometimes what's legal and what's ethical. And that's what I want to make sure. And I know our board's really good about those things, sorting that out. Just because we're allowed to do something doesn't mean that's good for kids. Amy had her hand up. Sorry. I know you can't see it, Elizabeth.
No, it's okay. In terms of the day camps, the rec director in Windsor today was talking about everything he's thinking, that it can only be a group of individual groups of no more than 10 kids, and trying to work around that of where they would be, that for that rainy day they would have some sort of shelter, and none of it can be inside. And he's kind of pulling his hair out. So
sounds crazy.
Yes, they gave an allowance for day camps to open, but some really strict guidance. So it doesn't equate to that. Yeah, day camps are starting, so let's open the school. It does not equate.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's good. I got the feedback. That we'll keep working on that. We don't have to make that decision until probably end of this month, first week in June, but it's out there. All right. We're done with the closing of school.
I was going to talk about just really briefly or fairly briefly about the call or video conference last week. That was the part 2 of the financial implications of COVID-19. And that was again sponsored by the Vermont Superintendents Association. And it included this time Secretary French, Ryan McLaren from Peter Welch's office, and Mark Rowe again. Ryan McLaren talked a lot about the CARES Act, and that it can be used for specific unbudgeted expenses as of March 20th. The state also has an education fiscal stabilization fund, which represents $31.1 million, and another $100 million of federal funds to restore K-12 learning, which has not yet been dispersed. There's another allowance of $3.5 million for childcare. These are national and not statewide. There's also a SAMHSA grant through the Department of Mental Health which is $2 million federal, which is not very much money for mental health. He indicated that this was the first step, that Peter Welch is among those pressuring for further relief packages, and that the priority for the next round of relief would be state and local governments with fewer strings attached. Mark Perot talked about his role at the Joint Fiscal Office, and I sent his office a clarifying email, actually, because he talked again about how that in FY20, the Joint Fiscal Office have estimated a $54 million shortfall in non-property tax revenues, which is a 9.5% reduction in those revenues. But I was having a hard time figuring out, or I couldn't put my hands on the information of how much of the ed fund that represents. So I sent his office an email, and that represents about 1/3 of available funds, which is really a huge portion. And he said in FY21, the current estimates indicate that there will be a shortfall of non-property tax of $112 million, which represents a 19% reduction, and is totally speculative because nobody knows how the conditions of the pandemic will evolve. Dan French said the CARES Act will provide some relief from COVID expenses, but won't touch the shortfall for FY21. He also said that now I've heard him say it several times that the light at the end of the tunnel is a vaccination, not flattening the curve. He said that we probably won't return to pre-COVID next year. And he said the Agency of Education is thinking about what's more useful for summer months, to remediate the spring or to prepare for the fall and what that will look like. And whereas Dan French often avoids direct answers, he said specifically that he acknowledged that some of the trauma from this period is going to have grave societal repercussions, and that districts need to think about how to mitigate that at the school level. And he said there's a lot of admiring the problem going on. We need to actually figure out how to approach it. And Mark Perot said that in a worst case scenario, we were looking at a 23 to 25 cent tax increase just on the shortfall. Okay. Looking ahead to summer and next school year, one of the questions that I had was exactly how equipped are our teachers and staff district-wide to be able to start a school year online, and should we as a board require that all instructors have demonstrable level of expertise in online instruction? And so I was wondering what the rest of the board thought of that. Should we likewise require that staff and instructors receive a demonstrable level of expertise in trauma-informed education? I realize that they already have quite a bit. I just wondered whether we as a board should think about asking that to be everybody. Does anybody have any thoughts about that?
Just clarify, Elizabeth, asking what to be everybody. You mean to everybody to be online trained? Is that what?
Well, there's actually couple of different parts of that. To have everybody be, have all instructors have a certain level of expertise in online instruction. And secondly, should we henceforth have that be one of our requirements in hiring practices.
Mhm. Yeah, I know.
Gee, I don't know.
Go ahead, Beth. Beth has her hand up. I can see everybody, Elizabeth. That's Beth Carter. Is your mic on, Beth?
All right, too many
Turning
buttons.
her mic.
Yeah, too many buttons to click.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I do think, Elizabeth, there is something that we should be doing, right? I don't know, right? Obviously, it's not any certification or right a level of training or whatever it is, but to find some sort of a training or an education, whatever you want to call it, to ensure that teachers and whoever's right engaging via remote learning really understand how to engage the folks right that are on the other end, because it's not easy. You have to sometimes pull people in, especially students, I would guess, or people that don't speak out that much. I think there is something there, because if we're going to have to go live with it next year, there has to be a little bit more of a level of effort on how do you engage, how do you encourage folks to show up. And when they show up, it's more than just being right on mute the whole time, because otherwise they're really probably not learning. Right? I work in an environment where we are all decentralized, and it's 20,000 people. And I can tell when people now are on the phone talking to me versus multitasking versus on the screen looking at me. So I do think there's an element there that you need to find a way to get them on and engaged versus on and right, I don't know, watching Netflix over there on the side. So there's something to be said for that. And it's not inherent in how people operate if they don't do it day in, day out.
I mean, hopefully we're not looking at more. Not that this is terrible. This has been great.
Yeah.
But hopefully we're not looking at more of this next year. But what level of expertise do we want to ask the teachers to achieve? And also, do we as a board want to make sure that they have that? And also, do we want to include that in our future hiring practices?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you measure that level of expertise, quite honestly, right? In the current environment is one. And then the other thing I would say is I would, right, look to see who has, right, and granted, right, probably a lot of teachers now have some experience from the last 6 months. It's a way of the workforce, right? I mean, I realize in a public school system, maybe not so much historically, but I can tell you in the workforce, it is a way of working. It's where you can hire the talent wherever they sit in the world. And you don't have to be constrained by your building and your offices wherever they sit in the world. No. So I think it's an important kind of way of working.
And I think it's actually, to me, I mean, if we're going to look at what we gain from all of this, what have we gained from this pandemic experience in terms of education? How are we going to actually, rather than trying really hard to get back to where we were, how are we going to actually use this as an advantage, this experience as an advantage in the future? And
yeah, and a lot of, I mean, and Tiffany knows, right? Some of the college courses right now, they're virtual learning. So a lot of our seniors and juniors, right, probably some even younger, are already in a virtual environment learning.
Yeah, I was going to jump in. I think Bill touched on that back towards the beginning of our meeting when we're having messages that we're sending out to families. We don't want to jump to any assumptions that this isn't working. I mean, granted, there are some students who may not be engaging, and definitely there was a learning curve for teachers going, 100% online, but there definitely are a lot of positives that are happening. I'm hearing teachers, I've actually been receiving work from some students that it's pretty impressive, some of the things that are happening. When it comes to the expertise as far as the online component, I just wanted to make sure folks know, and maybe Elizabeth, you were touching on this, the Agency of Ed does have an endorsement for an online teacher. I'm not sure if you're referring to teachers having that certification specifically, or if you're just thinking about professional development.
Yeah, I was thinking professional development. I didn't know that the Agency of Education had that.
So this is a good time for me to jump in. So I just want to let you know that Vermont,
Amy had her hand up too, but go ahead, Angie.
The Vermont Virtual Learning Cooperative has been tasked by the Vermont Agency of Education to partner with schools, offering their software and their curriculum for grades 6 through 12. They've been doing online virtual courses for a long time, from what I understand. We have about 12 teachers that are participating in a 10-hour facilitated online best teaching practices cohort that starts sometime this week. So there are opportunities out there to help our staff become better online teachers. Their philosophy for K-5 is, well, the way they work with teachers K-5, and I have to say, unfortunately, our high school teachers that did express interest decided that they could not manage the time commitment, but they're still going to be open to, if I have questions for them or want them to look at something, I'm sure they would be happy to consult with me in that manner. But for K-5, they really recommend a more project-based approach. So I am very carefully looking at our software budget and our software, what we currently spend our dollars on, and what we need to have in order to increase the rigor of what has been offered in the past 6 weeks during continuity. Again, I would like to reiterate what Tiffany said. There are a lot of good things happening, and I think we can learn from the things that have worked for kids. We can also learn what hasn't worked for kids, but I think the biggest thing that we need to ensure is that our teachers have time to really figure out what their curriculum looks like. So that's all I want to say.
Well, you know, one of the go ahead, Amy, because you've been patient with your hand up.
Yeah, about the online endorsement, that is something that the Professional Standards Board discussed early on before schools even closed. We voted to relax that requirement that any online learning can only be done by a teacher who has that endorsement. Our next meeting is the end of this month, the Professional Standards Board, and it would not surprise me at all if we had more conversation about that endorsement and how we can support all of our administrators and teachers to get some of that professional development.
So that endorsement is a 10 graduate credit course that Vermont Learning Cooperative teachers have to participate in order to teach their curriculum. They also provide their teachers with the curriculum, so that it's all online, and they have the system that it's all online already set up for their teachers. Whereas when we started this, our teachers had to figure out what that was, and they have had to upload all their resources if they needed to. They've had to look at software across the internet to find out what would work for their students. So we left a lot of that gathering in as their responsibility. The more that we can provide teacher-ready access to those kinds of tools, I think we would improve the student learning opportunities.
Right. Well, I can certainly bring that to the conversation at the next Professional Standards Board meeting.
I think that's a great idea, Amy. And again, I did not in any way mean to imply that what's happening now is at all
Irrelevant.
Or not,
that what's happening right now is, I mean, I don't think this year will be the same as next year. If next year we were told that it had to be all online learning, we're not going to be, number one, we're not going to be scrambling the way that the scramble happened this year. I think, for a lot of students, I have two boys one of whom is doing great with online learning and one of whom is feeling overwhelmed by it. So, obviously there's a lot of variance for every single person. Of course there is. And I did not mean to imply that we're all discovering things. And furthermore, this is all during some special circumstances. So learning in and of itself has been hard, even if it was taught by people who are experts in online teaching at the moment. I think, as you all know, you have to be in a calm and open mindset in order to be able to receive information and have it stick. So all that is.
One thing I would say, Elizabeth, though, and and maybe it's just that I'm super tired tonight. Today was a long day, but I really think this is another area where we might be scrambling again, because I think our policymakers are not planful. They're not preemptive. They're not trying to figure this out ahead of time. And essentially, wouldn't it have been nice? Bill talks about the 175 required days. What about we waived some of those at the end of the year, and we were able to work with our staff and get our staff ready for the potential of this. I heard Dan French, our beloved secretary, say on a call just the other day, they might know by August 1st whether we'd be opening remotely or whether that creates havoc. That creates an emergency. Teachers aren't going to work in the summer unless they're paid and paid well. It's just the nature of the beast. And we have time here. We have time, and I just think sometimes we're trying to hold on to policy, regulation, normal ways of doing business when this is not normal. And I just wish we had some creative thinking. And I'm not talking about this group here, because if this group ran the world, we'd figure this out. But the bottom line is I just worry at that policy level. I see a lot of politicking, a lot of end running, a lot of what's good for the economy, get the schools open so they can provide the childcare function so we can get people back to work. That's awful. It's horrendous. And I just don't think it's planful.
I agree. Yes.
And it's going to hurt our kids if we don't do this right.
Yep. Anyway, I just wanted to bring those couple of things up as far as that. Amy, if you could bring that up at the next standards meeting, that would be really, really helpful. I'd like for us to move on because I know Ed should still be on here and he has financials. And I'd love to be able to, we're halfway through our meeting. I'd love to be able to hear about.
And Ed sent out some of those documents. So I can also bring them up on the screen if we want them up. We don't have.
I would prefer if you could do that so that we can see it as Ed's talking us through it.
Okay, Ed, do you want to do the summary first? What do you want to do first, Ed? You need to turn your mic on, Tubal. Just turn your mic. That's it. Now
Summary would be good.
The summary would be good. All right, let me do that, and we will pull that up. I just want to make sure I've got the right one, so stay with me here.
Ed, I just have I wanted to say that I noticed on one of the pages, because I don't have it open in front of me because I'm looking at all y'all, but that there was an overspending in transportation, and I wondered whether that had to do with the lunches. And one of the things that was specifically asked during the talk with about the financial implications of COVID-19, there was a specific question about whether transportation or lunches would be covered. And the answer was that yes, all transportation for lunches will be covered.
Well, first of all, there's the reason that transportation is overspent right now is because no one has gotten to me about transportation for any kind of reimbursement for transportation for a special payment for transportation for the lunches. I think what they're talking about is that they're going to give us the transportation aid that we requested as if they were all going to school still.
No. They said that specifically that it falls under the CARES grant, and that it specifically is paired with delivery of the school lunches.
So I haven't heard anything like that.
That specific question was asked on that call last week. I'm sure you weren't on that call. There's no reason that you would be on that call, but I just wanted to let you know that answer was given.
So Elizabeth, a lot of the money that you're talking about hasn't been earmarked. They're still trying to decide how to spend it. And what the state's trying to do at this point is they're trying to figure out a way carry some of that money into next year. So what they did originally was ask us for numbers in terms of what we thought we were going to have to spend in excess of what we would have had to spend had not the pandemic happened.
But I
And
thought,
the reason for that, excuse me?
I'm sorry, my understanding was that the CARES grant, the $34 million specifically earmarked for the COVID-19 extra expenses, the $34 million does cover any expenses incurred specifically and only for the COVID-19. And then there's another grant that I think the $1.6 billion that Phil Scott's trying to figure out what to do with. That's separate, and that can be, I think they were talking
So there's
about.
been no talk at all of money in addition to regular education expenditure. So what we're going through the year as if pandemic never happened in terms of the financials. So we were due a payment on April 30th, a third payment from the state ed fund. And that payment came in its entirety, which was somewhat in question back in March. So the money that you're talking about, all I've seen for that money is that they've said that they're trying to come up with a formula. They wanted to know what we thought we were overspending, and VASBO, the Business Association group, said, we're not going to give you that number, because what they were going to try to do was try to figure out what that number was and then short pay us whatever that dollar figure was and take it out of that other money. So what I've been told is there has been no consensus on how the money from CARE is going to be spent. So I don't think it right now it makes any sense for us to have anything. If it happens, we have taken everything that we have associated with the pandemic has had a project code attached to it, and that project code identifies it as a COVID expense. If we do get money, which is still in question whether it will actually happen, we have the number. It's just I don't think it's a good financial strategy to count on that money. So what I'm reporting tonight is what it looks like as if the pandemic never happened.
I think that's fair, and I'm glad that you're coding things to be special to the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
If they do, come through with it. I think that I made a note of when what's his name, Ryan McLaren's face fell when he was watching the talk about the actual budget shortfall, because he was talking about the money that was being given by the CARES money and how much that was going to cover of all this terrible COVID-19 stuff. And then when they said what the real numbers are that we're lacking, it was like, his face was like, oh.
Yeah. And I think Ed's right. What we're most worried about, and you'll see as we go through the financials, we're most worried about next year. I mean, regardless of
right.
The last thing I heard about the CARES money is that whatever your percentage of Title I money is, or CFP money, given the full pot, like let's say ours is 15% of the statewide Title I monies, that then we're going to get, that percentage. But again, I think this year is not going to be the year. What a lot of business managers and superintendents are worried about is that the state knows we're saving money, and that most districts are going to end up with positive balances at the end of this year. And then, much like healthcare a few years ago, will they try to claw back some of that savings by reducing the amount of funding in FY21? But I think for right now, Ed's got the right approach. Where are we right now? What have we spent? What's our year to date? And that's what we're going to look at. So I'm going to put that up. I assume everybody, you can see that, right, Elizabeth?
I can see an agenda, David.
Yeah, I've still got the agenda.
Okay, so let me go back and see if I can.
Can you scroll down?
Yeah, hold on. No, I think I can do this. Hold on just a second. I think I can pull this up. I'm going to stop presenting and try again. Hold on a minute.
So if you take a look, so nobody has it in front of them then?
No.
Okay.
How about that? Is that anything?
Yes. It's coming up. Yes.
I have it, Ed.
Thank you, Amy.
All right, we've got it. It was sent out anyhow, but now it's on the screen.
Okay, so I don't know if you can see that. It looks pretty small to me.
It's okay.
You can widen your window. Maybe I can widen my window. Did that help?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so everything you're looking at in the screen that David just brought up is the revenue. And you can see where the budget is. Receivables is what we expect to get as the year progresses. And then the year-to-date actual. And if you go down the list, speaking to the transportation, one of the things that's up in the air is that tech transportation stopped on or around the 18th or 17th of March. So the state hasn't decided how they're going to reimburse for that. The thinking is that they're going to only give us up till the date it closed. But that runs counter to what they're doing with the state aid for transportation, which is down at the bottom of the page, the $25,606. They're going to pay us that in its entirety. Okay, so that's in there. I carried the 46,000, but in addition, I carried the cost of transportation in its entirety. So that's why when you're looking at the expenditures, it looks a little bit over. And then the education spending grant portion, that's $739,000. That money is the last payment from the town of Windsor, which is due on June 28th, I believe, which I've begged them to give me sooner because we've been constantly in a cash flow problem the whole year, especially at Mount Ascutney, because at the beginning of the year, we merged West Windsor and Windsor, and we had to basically fund a third checking account because we had to keep the money that was in Windsor and West Windsor there until the checks all cleared. So we didn't close the accounts for Windsor or West Windsor until October. We had money in there, but we had to fund the third account and put the money that we were getting from the state for the new entity into Mount Ascutney. So I also wanted you to take a look at their, there's an investment interest earned, $8,305.37. It's about a little more than halfway down the page. The way our checking account works is it earns interest. We have what we call a sweep. So the money that we have, we've got a minimum that we keep in there. In your case, it's around 300 grand. And every night, the excess is swept into an investment account, and we make interest on that. And that represents the interest. And that's important because as we get into the expenditures, you're going to see the flip side of that. But unless there's any questions on revenues, we can go right on to the expenditures. Okay, so with the expenditures, the top one is by object, meaning, as you can see on the far left, the description tells you what the object is. And right across, it goes actual budget, encumbrance, year-to-date expenditures, and available budgets. And the available balance is just the actual budget minus the encumbrances and plus the year-to-date expenditures. And you go down the list, as Elizabeth pointed out, transportation is over budgeted right now, but I expect that to right itself as I get more guidance from the state about transportation. But right now, being conservative, I'm carrying it a little bit on the excess side. Tuition's over because I've gotten a bill from Woodstock from 2017 for about 100 and let's see, what was it for? Yeah, $103,000 from 2017. So I don't know if you've been following Woodstock at all lately, but they're a mess financially. And what they've discovered is they didn't do their billing correctly. So they've gone back and they've identified where they didn't get paid enough from certain towns. Most of the sending towns owed them money because what they did was unlike every other school district in the state, they changed the way they got their tuition money from sending towns by they made it a 3-time-a-year payment rather than a spring and fall and spring. So they created, instead of 2 payments, they made it 3 payments. And unfortunately, in 17, they missed their 3rd payment.
So
Now they're coming back and they're saying, you guys owe us. Now that money is what's putting the tuition over.
and
Yes, Beth.
yeah. So are there no terms of that agreement that they have to bill? Like with most agreements, there's a time frame of which they have to bill within versus forever. No, are there no terms of any agreement?
There's no terms, but I think they're really leaning heavily on the good faith thing.
Yeah, that runs thin.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
In these conditions, your lack of proper planning doesn't constitute an emergency for us.
Yeah, I would agree.
That's been my thought with Ed. I say don't pay it.
Okay.
I think that if we decided not to pay it, that we would get involved in a discussion with the state, because along with the fact that they didn't collect correctly, they also didn't file their SEER reports correctly. So they were out about $500,000 in special ed reimbursement as well. So they've been spending the last year chasing money from various sources because they were looking at like an $800,000 shortfall. So I've got it in there. I'm telling you guys about it. I feel like we should pay it. I don't know how we should pay it, whether we should pay it over 3 years or pay it this year. But my financials at this point include that money.
Any thoughts about that from anybody else?
We don't have to decide tonight.
No, we don't. We don't. But we might want to have a healthy discussion.
I would prefer to pay it over a period of time, because it doesn't really seem right for them to fob their shortfall off on us.
Well, it wasn't just us. It was a lot of towns.
I know. I realize that.
Some of which have paid them already. But since I'm going to be talking with the state a lot this summer, it's just another thing to talk to them about. Maybe.
I think it's appropriate that we pay it, but I don't think it's necessarily requires us to pay it all at once.
Right.
I think we can be, we can make it work better for us. I don't think I think, again, I think we are responsible. It's a debt we incurred. We should be responsible to pay it, but I don't think we're,
Here's a question, Ed. Since it was from 2017, how does that square with the existence of our district?
Yeah, the entity doesn't even exist anymore.
Yeah, and I've talked to them about that. But they again, this is unprecedented. I don't know how to respond to your question. Yeah, you're right. I've made that clear to them. You're chasing money from an entity that doesn't even exist anymore. And I think Windsor made it quite clear, I think in their agreement, that they didn't want to pick up any debt associated with West Windsor. So I don't know. I guess we could go back to the town of Windsor, West Windsor, and ask them for a special article, pay off the 2017 tuition, or the Mount Ascutney School Board could come up with a solution. It's entirely up to you guys. Yes, Amy?
I think it's worth, David, having a conversation with the state.
Yeah, and also maybe our legal. Who have you been talking to at the state about this, Ed? Anybody? Or are you just talking to Woodstock?
Yeah, I've been just talking to Woodstock.
Okay, yeah, because the other thing we could do is we could check in with legal at this point. That's not a little bit of money. That's a lot of money, and it's a lot of money heading into a year that is going to be potentially disastrous financially. I mean, that's the conversations Ed and I have had. I mean, the entity doesn't exist. The debt was incurred 3 years ago, almost 3.5 years ago. I think it's worth a conversation with legal. I mean, I think it's worth paying a couple $100 to. I think we would prevail because it's not even the same entity. There's no way to chase that school district anymore because that school district does not exist.
Well, I was thinking more, not trying to get out of paying it, but that it doesn't really seem there seems to be unfairness here that I think we should address. But I also don't want to give Woodstock short shrift. They provided the service. But maybe there's a way.
So Elizabeth, do you think it would be worth, and Bill and Nancy, do you think it would be worth approaching West Windsor on this?
No, I don't know.
I mean, to Elizabeth's point, you're right. They provided a service to West Windsor at the time. I mean, I just have an issue with somebody coming back 3 years later asking for money. That's just a fundamental issue, right? Right. To your point, and lack of controls, whatever it is. But I would hate to then, right, go through the Mount Ascutney budget coming up and say, oh, we have to cut here, 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 and here because we have to pay for something that happened 3 years ago. I wouldn't support that.
Well, not only is it here, 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 and here, because we have to pay for something that happened 3 years ago, but also before West Windsor was part of the district that we're talking about. I mean, it seems, I don't know. It seems like
Exactly.
worked out.
There's a lot of things that when you start talking about school finance and just the whole way that we fund schools, there's a lot of things that are unfair. And there's a lot of times, and I've talked to school boards and they've said that's just not fair and I'm going to write my legislator. And at the end of the day, it doesn't change anything. The fact is that's the way it is. So I don't want to be blunt, but we can talk all day long about how unfair it is. The fact is that when you look at the end result of this financial report, you're still in the black.
Yeah, you've got the whole amount in there, Ed?
Yes. So as far as your question, Beth, it won't result in anybody getting cut per se, not this year and not next year, because next year's budget is already in. And all we're waiting for right now is the state legislator to set the tax rate. And Elizabeth's already said that tax rate, given what they've projected in shortfalls with the room and meals tax and potential defaults on property taxes, it's going to be significant. In a usual year, they change the second homeowner's rate and they barely touch our rate. In fact, our rate's been locked for the last 3 years at $1. So I don't know what's going to happen, but we've got nothing in the budget right now that would be affected by paying this bill because everything's done. And my financials tonight will include the bill. And as far as 21 is concerned, those budgets have passed and all they're waiting for is the rate at the state. So, I mean, the only time we'd have any time to put it into the budget would be for FY22 at this point. But my recommendation would be
pay it.
To keep the peace would be to pay it.
Well, if we were going to pay it in any year, given the future, this would be the year to pay it. Anybody strongly opposed to just paying it?
I am. This is Beth.
Beth? Yeah.
Yep.
Would you rather finance it, Beth, or just not pay it?
I'd rather not pay it.
Okay.
And
Anybody else?
Amy feels the same as Beth.
Okay.
This is Bill. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Just barely.
I'm with Beth.
I am too.
Don't pay it.
I just don't know if the shoe were on the other foot. I would want it to be paid, but I don't want to take it to the taxpayers in West Windsor. They're already
Yeah.
overwhelmed.
Good
We
point.
have Ed confidence we will not have such a thing happen.
Well, it would give Ed a little more authority if somebody wanted to make a motion that we do not pay that back bill to Woodstock, and somebody.
I don't think we're there yet, but you guys can do that. I mean, I certainly can have that conversation with him. If we say no, Elizabeth, you will hear from that board. And I don't know whether you're following it, but it's a real showdown over there right now.
I have been following it.
The
It's
superintendent quit, the
Right.
business manager quit.
Yeah.
I mean,
And the board
Yeah.
chair and vice chair quit
Yeah.
all really abruptly. I know.
so I wouldn't be
Sounds like a fun
surprised
place.
if you heard from them. So just be prepared for that.
Yep.
Well, the sentiment, what I'm hearing is I heard at least four, if not
I heard
five.
everybody.
I heard everybody say don't pay it. So
Right.
I don't know whether you want a
Except for
motion.
Nancy.
Yeah,
Hey, Chris.
Well,
I-
Chris
I-
said,
I would pay it.
Nancy said she'd pay it. Chris alluded to the fact that he'd pay it. So
I'd
that's,
pay it.
So by my count, that's
But I'm not gonna yell and scream and fight hard to pay it if everybody else is for not paying it. I don't have a problem with it.
I agree with Chris. I would do the same thing.
well, it's 4-2 straight up. And I know we don't have a motion, but I mean, we could make it part of the record if somebody wanted to make a motion.
I don't want to make a motion at this time.
Okay.
Okay. I'd still like to think about it for do we need to pay it this week, Ed?
No.
No.
Do we have
I
enough?
made it pretty clear that I'm in no hurry to pay this.
Okay.
And
So we need to think
the
about
other
it.
thing is I would ask David that if he could get a Pietro.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I would like too.
Yeah, I wrote that down. So I'll talk with him as well. But I think you could certainly talk to Woodstock about the conversation tonight and that it wasn't a group hug.
No, I will. I'll pass that on. All right. So what I did here is I've showed you, I want to go down to debt service. And I did show you the amount of interest that the account earned, which was around what did I say? About $8,300. Well, the interest that was on the note that we took out to carry that money until we paid it all off was about $12,000, almost $12,750 worth of interest to have that note. So the way it works is, or the way I look at it is the interest, that number, that 12,723, what we actually paid in interest would be that number less the number that we earned in interest. So it's roughly $4,000 we paid in interest to open the account. And I want to point that out to you because I think as we move forward, as we get closer to year end, we're going to have to go to the banks a lot more. I mean, I've already had conversations, and it's a good thing that we have a good relationship with Muskoma, but a lot of banks are saying no. And municipal debt is probably the most favorable debt you can carry. But they've been so overwhelmed that they're really reluctant at this point to do that, which is a little bit frightening to me. This is the first time that I've seen that. It was never a problem to get any kind of, if you needed money, you could get money. And now it sounds to me like it's going to be more and more and more. So I'm going to have to, as we get towards the end of the year, I'm going to suggest to the board that we keep a line of credit open in the area of $1.5 million for Mount Ascutney.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, because the way the line of credit works is if I take out $1 million, say, and I have to use $250,000, and then I pay back the $250, because we pay it back as we have more money in the account. It automatically gets paid back, all right?
Mm-hmm.
But once I pay back that $250,000, my line of credit is now $750,000. It doesn't go back up to $1 million. Every time I use money, the amount of money I can borrow gets to be less. And Mount Ascutney School District is a new entity, so it's hard to say what the ebbs and flows are going to be. This year was particularly hard. I'm hoping it won't be, but with the pandemic, I'm not sure. I don't know how they're going to approach this. So I will tell you that as we move towards the end of the year, I am going to have Mascoma open up a significant line of credit. I'm going to come to you with that line of credit. So please remember this conversation. That's why I want to have it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we go back to the summary. If you get down to the bottom, you're looking at about 95% spent. Now, keep in mind that everything, as you look at those expenditure by object, there's a bunch of encumbrances. And if you get to the bottom of those encumbrances, the amount that's encumbered right now is $1.855 million. That includes the wages through the end of the year, the benefits through the end of the year. And transportation, again, will be changing. I will tell you that up front. So all of those numbers are subject to change. And the other number that you're going to see is there down there in that encumbrance column, the second from the bottom, $49,504. That's the amount of money that the school district voted to put towards the food program. Okay, I haven't paid that yet because I don't know what that number is going to be in the end. But I'm carrying what was budgeted, because you'll see it from the other one, the Ascutney balances, where we are with that. So overall, you're looking at about $184,000 in the black, or 1.59%. Now, the question could be, why is that? That probably because so much of your expenses is tied up in wages and benefits and tuition and assessments, and you're paying those in full this year. All of them. So you aren't going to see that significant, which people, and David was surprised because he said, wow, I would have thought it would be more. I would have too, but if you think about it, it's not going to be, because so much of it's tied up in those things I just mentioned. The next graph, or the next page in your instance, I just did it. I'm not sure how you want to see this. I did it by location as well. And I want to show you the locations because I don't make those locations. That's the state's chart of accounts that makes me do that. I have to track every one of those. I have to track Albert Bridge because I have to track State Street because it's an elementary school. I have to track secondary because secondary is K or 7 through 12. And it resides in Windsor. I have to track those with a location code and a level. Location, I do code in a level. Then when you get to Windsor, Windsor has its own location wide. So that was like district wide in the old days. And what resides there for you guys is and art, music, and media, library, and guidance, and the nurse, all are there because their expenditures aren't subject to one category or the other. Excuse me, one level or the other in Windsor. So you have a Windsor location wide. Then you have a Mount Ascutney, and that Mount Ascutney is location wide. So that's where the tuition is. That's where the school board is. That's where the assessments are. And again, it's over because the tuitions are over. So I just put it together. Oh, go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, that was my question on the why it's over. So that's primarily because of that Woodstock tuition stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
That, and that's also where that interest that I talked about for the debt was. that $12,000 that I was talking about. So the $12,000 and the $100,000 for the tuition, that's why it's over there. So I put them both together because I'm not sure now that it's Mount Ascutney. When I show it to you in object code, it just combines everything. When I show it to you by location, it gives you a better idea of where you're spending the money. I will tell you that the entire expenditure report is now 17 pages long. And when I sent the detail over, there's 9 tabs to that detail that I had, and I broke it out by Albert Bridge, and I showed you all of them sorted by object and all of the other ones sorted. So you'll see if you look at the detail that I sent along, all of the numbers that this summary is built off of is in those summaries. But it's pretty thick. It takes a while to put this together. My hope is that I can put together a report with this new e-finance thing. They don't have any real reporting that you can do from the system. Like with NIMRIC, I used to be able to do reports from the system. I can do reports, but they're not very user-friendly. So they do have another added thing that they call Cognos, where you could do some programming to get reports. And we're just trying to get our arms around the actual software for the accounting before we get into this another software for programming. But I will tell you that one of the things we're doing at the year end this year is the state has decided again to change the chart of accounts. So because we were an early adopter, we have to change all of our charts of accounts and all of our entities, lock, stock, and tomahawk, June 30th, which is going to be a bear. I mean, it doesn't stop with this e-finance conversion. But we're going to do that, and hopefully when we get to the end of that, that will be it. They won't change anything for a while. So again, you're $184,000 in the black.
Any questions for Ed? Ooh, somebody.
Okay, so the next section is the district funds.
That's the balance sheet, right?
So you start at the top, and this just shows you that the general fund is a fund by itself, okay? And you look at the revenue and you look at the expenditures, and it says the current balance is $1.228 million. And so why is that? And the reason that is because why doesn't that match? Can you make that bigger, David?
Hold on a second. I'm trying to get to the right spot. Don't you want to be in the
Yeah, I want to be in the Mount Ascutney School District fund balances. That's the revenue. That's the presentation.
That's not the
all the way to the end.
Is that the fund balance?
No, all the way to the end.
Yeah, I see. I can't pull that up. Balances. Here we are.
Yeah.
Are these the ones?
That's it. Yeah. Yeah, so it's 1.228 million. The very top. Make that a little bigger, David, if you can.
Let me see.
And why is that not $184,000 like I just showed you? Why is the general fund in this particular one looking like 1.22 million, and why is it 184 when I do my projection? That's because it is a projection, and the difference between the two is what you're looking at in this Mount Ascutney School District fund balances is actual revenue and actual expenses. I didn't put in any encumbrances for expenditures or any receivables for revenue. So right now, or at April 30th, the balance there was 1.228. The next one down is community enrichment, which is a West Windsor fund. And right now it's the $9,000 deficit. Now, there's money on the way, about $3,550. And it'll knock that down to around 5,000 or 5,000 and change. That's the money that is for, well, maybe Jennifer Aldrich can tell us what that
is. Jen still on the phone? She was having trouble staying on the line.
Okay. Well, what I gather, at the beginning of the year, community enrichment was a fund that was started by donations from the community. There was a $4,061 balance when we closed out last year. The reason you're not seeing that in the year-end balance of 19 is because it was carried over as deferred revenue. Then there was another $570 donation to that fund. And then in January, the Adventure Club became part of that. So the Adventure Club and the community enrichment. So the community enrichment played for jugglers and clowns and stuff like that, as people thought was necessary. And then Adventure Club. And Adventure Club, most of the deficit there is the Adventure Club. So right now, if we get the $33,555 in there, you'll have a deficit of $5,487. The equipment grant was a grant that was applied for by Craig Locarno, and it was for a milk dispenser, I believe, at Windsor, and he bought it, got it. The Hinton Trust is a trust that was funded by a woman who passed away, and she gave the school district $40,000, and it gets drawn down as needed, I guess, by the principal makes that decision. And it's not like the Hicks Nichols Fund in Wethersfield, David.
Nowhere near as much, right?
No, this is the actual. This isn't. You're not living off principal here. They're going right at the. They're not living off interest. They're going right at the principal.
Well, right at the principal. Yep.
Okay. The fresh fruits and vegetables is in a deficit because the AOE and child nutrition program are lagging in their reimbursements. That should be zero shortly. Humanities Camp is a camp that's set up in Windsor. Tiffany, that's a camp that was, I think some of your social studies teachers did that. Yeah. And every year they set out a grant, and that's the balance right now. I don't know what they're, I think I got an email a while back about that. They're still trying to do something.
Yeah, that's the grant that I mentioned earlier. A social studies teacher wants to do as a virtual summer program.
Okay. Medicaid IEP. Medicaid IEP money is money that is given back based on nursing services. So when you do, nursing services get submitted to the federal Medicaid program, and then they reimburse a portion of those money. Now that $5,765.24 is money that was in West Windsor prior to the state combining all Medicaid at the SU. The state required us back in 13 or 14 to make everything out of the SU. So there was no longer a school district IEP fund. It was an SU-wide IEP fund. But the money that was in those funds prior to that date stayed at the schools. So that Medicaid IEP money is money that came over from West Windsor. Rise Vermont, those are individual grants that we get, or that they come through Mount Ascutney Hospital, and they come through Fletcher Allen, from what I gather. And pretty much you call them up and they give you the money. It's hard to track because it's so easy to get the money. But the reason there's a deficit there is because there was an $1,800 grant that was written to for Windsor, but the check was written to the SU. So what we need to do is transfer those dollars from the SU back to Windsor, and that would wipe out that $1,400 deficit. Capital reserve, that $833,000 that you're seeing there, that's the combination of the track and the roof last summer. And, excuse me, the $833,000 is what was carried over from
last summer.
Windsor and West Windsor. 40,000 of that 833,000 was West Windsor's money. The 514,321.40 is the combined cost of the track and the roof. So the balance left is $319,000, of which 40 grand came from West Windsor. Debt service, again, that's Albert Bridge. The Gertrude Sears Permanent Fund has been in there since I started. And it works like the Hicks Nichols Fund. You're only supposed to spend, because it's a permanent fund, you're only supposed to spend the interest. So you can imagine what the interest is on $4,500. So it's like $1.30 or $5.30 every year. So we have to figure out a lot of these now that this town has gotten out of it. This stuff has been passed over to us being the SU. We're gonna have to get to the bottom of a lot of these. That's one of them we're gonna have to figure out what to do with. The food program. The food program, as you can see, is running a deficit right now of $38,000. And then there's the summer food program that's also running a deficit. Now, none of this includes the summer food program revenue. We haven't gotten any summer food program revenue yet. So when you're talking about the summer food program, when they closed the schools, or when we closed the schools, they said that we want to continue to provide lunches. And once they did that, they shut down the school year food program, the child nutrition program, which was a separate program with a separate reimbursement amount. And then they moved everything over to what they called the summer nutrition program. So we have to track those differently. So what we're seeing now is most of the costs associated, all of the costs associated with the food program are going to the summer food program. We haven't gotten all the reimbursements for the food program yet, and we haven't gotten all the reimbursements for the the summer food program. We haven't gotten any of the summer food program. So I had a conversation with Craig
and Wendy.
week, and for April, right? Yeah.
March.
For March, I'm sorry. Yeah, for March, they have put a reimbursement in with the child nutrition for $32,000, which is significant. I will say that part of that's got to go to Wethersfield and Heartland as well, because in March they had their own programs. It wasn't until the 1st of April that we went to all being at West Windsor. But those are yet to be determined. Again, on the program side, the revenue includes the $49,000 that was coming from the general. So even with that general fund, you're looking at $38,000.
So that's why, just as Ed explained, I think that's why the summer program could be very beneficial. I mean, it's costing money to run the program, but as a comparison, Ed said we billed for that half a month in March about $34,000 in revenue, and so we're expecting 68, 80, 68, 70, 75,000.
David,
what?
We don't know what we're expecting.
Well, you can double it. That was half a month.
I know. I get it. I just would be careful. I would be cautious because
I know.
You're not including
I can multiply. Right, I know. But it's going to be significant. We were billing on average across all 3 districts about, what did Craig say, 25,000 in revenue or 30,000? So I'm anticipating the revenue is going to be strong, which will be good.
All right. So finally, you get down to the 800s. Why the 800s is because, again, there's a bunch of little scholarships. Some of them are active and actually give money, and some of them that have been in there since the 1800s. And we're still trying to unravel that. So I didn't want to the list of the 800s that have a little bit of money in them is another page long. And the total amount is $59,000. So rather than put that all together and show you each one, I just put it all together and said, those are the scholarships. They're all Windsor scholarships. They all used to be out of the town of Windsor. We only got them when we went to Mount Ascutney.
Come on.
So those are the funds, the active funds at Mount Ascutney, and what the projected balances are. Questions?
No.
And finally, there's the food program bought a van for $21,000. The question I have to the board is, do you want to take the $21,000 out of the general fund or the capital reserve?
Just to explain a little bit, we had to do some food service delivery next year. The plan was to out of the food program to purchase a van to do some of that delivery. When this whole pandemic hit, we saw an opportunity. You know, Jim had a good buy on a van. He did some shopping around, and we needed a van to do some inventory movement. And the buses are doing a lot of the delivery, but there was a lot of stuff that needed to happen. So that's what we did. We bought the van early, essentially. So do we want to take it out of capital improvement, or do we want to take it out of the general fund?
What is the better one to do? What is your advice?
Well, if you take it out of the capital reserve, it doesn't draw down on the $184,000 that I'm projecting the surplus to be in FY20. But the flip side is if you take it out of capital reserve, you've got $21,000 less than you had before.
Right.
Yes, Beth. Can't hear you, Beth.
I clicked one button, not the other. So in the past, right, so when we bought the van last year, whenever it was, Tiffany, to save on bus expenses, right, we had approved that. So was the buying the van for the food, did it already go through an approval flow? I don't remember it, but I could have not been at the meeting.
No, well, part of it, Beth, is that the food program is a separate entity. It doesn't It doesn't operate out of a general fund. So there's a a food service fund. So we thought we would, especially given the revenues we'd be taking in between now and June, that we'd be okay. So it was just something that quite frankly I authorized. We were going to have to do it in September anyway, and.
So if it's part of the food program, then isn't that at the supervisory union? Wouldn't that come out? Wouldn't that 21,000 come out from there?
Well, it gets a little tricky because remember, everybody subsidizes the food program out of each individual district. So I don't think that subsidy expense should come from Wethersfield and Heartland, because after the summer, it's going to be used by Mount Ascutney. It's not going to be used by Wethersfield. Okay. And so that's why we're asking. I think it's a legitimate amount. It's not so much an expense, it's more of an increase in your subsidy if we use the general fund.
Yeah, so one more question, Ed. So if we take it out of the general fund, right? So that 184, that potential 184 upside becomes 160. And then let's say it stays at 160 next year, and we would vote to move that 160 into the reserve, correct? That's the flow?
Yeah, that's in a perfect world. Yeah. I mean,
in a perfect
world. what happens is that when you get to the end of a given year, like whatever surplus we have at the end of this year would be used. You'd have to vote on it for next year.
For next year. Right.
So that would be something for 2022. But I will say that other districts have used it as a revenue to buy down the tax rate too. So there are two uses. One is buy down, and the other one is capital reserve.
Yep.
But you're exactly right, Beth. That's what would happen.
Yep.
I think we should use the general fund.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
I'm with Elizabeth.
So do you want a motion, Ed, or do you want to just get a sense of the board like you did on the other?
I just want to be as transparent as possible with the board. I mean, I don't want anyone to be surprised.
Well, it might be good to make a motion to increase our general fund subsidy.
Amy?
I make a motion to pay for the van through our general fund.
Yeah.
Second.
So Amy moved. Who seconded?
Bill,
All right, Bill seconded.
All those in favor of paying for the food service van via the general fund, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye, Chris.
Are there any nays?
And we don't need a roll call. Sounds good.
So just in closing, I will say, as you look at the Mount Ascutney, when you get a chance to look at the Mount Ascutney fund balances, you'll see those funds that are in red that I went through. If they are in red at the end of the year, practice has been to use a transfer from the general fund to zero them out.
You're back to that balance sheet, right, Ed? Or the
No, I'm back to the Mount Ascutney School District fund balances, where I showed you the general fund, community enrichment.
okay.
Northampton,
Yeah, I got you.
Westford.
I got you.
So if we close the year out and the food program's got a deficit that's larger than the subsidy,
We
then we're
covered.
going to have to the general fund's going to have to pay that down, pay that off to zero it out. And that's in any one of these funds that's negative.
What if it ends up positive, Ed? I mean, suppose the food program makes money. Does that go back to the general fund? I know I'm an optimist here, but
You're not supposed to make money. So you're already factoring in $49,000, right?
Okay.
Of a transfer. So if it didn't need the 49,000, I would just take whatever I needed from the general fund. So say to offset the deficit, it was 30,000. So I take 30,000 and what was the budget, so that would show up in the general fund as less than what you had budgeted.
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. Yeah, because the food program cannot run a surplus, right?
No, because it's already being subsidized. It will never be positive because it already has to. It requires money from the general fund.
Gotcha.
So the way you just balance it out by general fund money one way or the other.
Yeah, less subsidy. I got you.
Right.
Any questions? I think we would just follow that same protocol, right? Unless anybody strongly disagrees, I think that would be it. And I think the real where we don't know right now is what Ed said. We don't have a real clear picture of the revenues, and I think that'll get straightened out. I hope by the end of June. But I think we could have another final report in late June or early July and have a rough idea. Ed's pretty good on his balances. When the audit comes in, it's usually within dollars and pennies of what Ed sees in those fund balances. So even with all the e-finance nightmare, it stayed pretty close.
Okay, does anybody have any other questions for Ed? If not, thank you, Ed. I think I speak for everybody in thanking you for bringing that to us.
Okay, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Ed.
Good night. Okay. The next thing on our agenda is the interdistrict choice policy. We held off on really discussing this because Bill wasn't with us, if you recall last time.
That's correct.
And also, no one had read the samples that you had gotten for us. Chris, when last we left, Chris said we need a policy that tells people what the options are, but that we get to choose the options. And Jennifer Aldrich asked the question, what are we trying to solve with the policy? What are the goals of solving that problem? So that is where we are with the interdistrict choice policy. Did everybody read the sample policies that were sent about?
Yes.
Nancy, I know you did.
Yes.
Did everybody else?
Amy said she did. I see her hand.
So I read them last time.
Ah, there you go. What a student.
Stars for Amy. And again, reading them over, I think the Addison Northwest applies more to us. The others I thought were more for SU districts that had multiple school districts, kind of like Windsor Southeast, as opposed to a single district that had 2 buildings.
I totally agree. Although I think there were, as I recall, I think the Otter Creek one had some elements that we could borrow, which we already talked about last month, which was that they only allow for applications during certain times of the year, and the rest of the time they
Right. Yeah, that was good.
and like we were talking about.
But I think again we have to look at what are we trying to provide choice, or are we, certainly the Otter Creek one is set up to allow people to move all around, and is that what we're trying to do or not? And that's part of the question, I think.
Yeah, that's the real question. And that was Jennifer's question. What problem are we trying to solve?
Bill, now that you are with us this time, do you have something that you'd like to weigh in with?
I mean, I agree with Jennifer in that, what exactly are we trying to solve? And I think, I think if there is a possibility to capture students who would otherwise not go to either one of our schools, then something can come up. But I can't see with a school the size of Albert Bridge having a flow to and from would be anything particularly beneficial.
I'm inclined to say that at the moment, because we are just entering into really the true discussion, which we'll talk about in just a second, the true discussion of the whatever we're calling the innovation purposeful change team, or whatever it is that we're calling it at the moment, exploratory planning team. I would think that we would want to, as we also said last time, that we might want to wait until after we have really gotten in there before we really before we really talk about.
I think that coming up with a policy at this point is premature.
So I would propose that we. Oh, is there somebody? Amy. Yeah.
My understanding is that there's an article in our Articles of Agreement.
Yes.
That says, and that's the only reason that we're really talking about this now.
Correct.
And as a group, the exploratory group, we said that we weren't even going to talk about how we would move kids around.
Right.
For a long, long time. So
right.
We need to have something in place, whether it's what we're currently doing now, that it will be up to the administrators and the board will not get into it at all, or something more along the lines of what Addison has.
I was just going to say, I think that because the real reason that we're having this discussion is the Article of Agreement, but we do have a policy at the moment.
That's correct.
That we can fall back on. I'm inclined to have that be a placeholder until after we've at least made some headway on the exploratory planning team. Not that we are going to decide through that process anytime soon how students will be distributed or anything like that, but we might have a better idea of what we would, whether we would like to have a school choice policy at that time or not. I mean, I don't think we're in a position, in other words, I don't think we're in a position to create a policy right now. What do you, I'm getting the sense that everybody feels that same way.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I would certainly agree.
Yeah.
I
and
agree.
I think, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I think we should just set it aside for now. We have something in place now.
Well,
And-
I think what you should do though, because your articles expressly state the Mount Ascutney School District will have a policy. I think what you might want to do is that, the a motion that the Mount Ascutney School District.
We did though. We already did that.
That's true. That's true.
We did that for the Mount Ascutney School District already.
That's true. Yeah, every district did that. And looking at that Addison policy again, I think Amy's right. It basically is it's a lot wordier, but it basically is our policy. It talks about,
It's more thorough than our policy is.
Yeah, it's a little more thorough, but it essentially outlines the same. And the only difference is it says that once a sibling is in that building, all the other siblings can go to that building without having to go through the request process. But it's essentially the same policy. But I'm fine keeping the one we've got now and not getting any more wordy. I mean, it's probably okay to do that.
I'm inclined to just keep it as we have it right now, and then if we want to change it at another point in time, we decide then that we're going to, pull in all these other policies and use them as models. But for right now, I say we keep it simple.
So just to be clear, we've had a couple of parents who've come, at least one, if not two, have come to the Mount Ascutney board, and we said we'd be looking at policies and setting a policy by July 1. I think what we have to say, if they come back to us next month or in August, we'll say the Mount Ascutney board decided that they would live by the supervisory union policy, at least for now. We didn't change it.
Is there anybody else who's on this meeting right now? I see that there are several people who are on here. Is there anybody else who would like to weigh in at this time? No? Okay. Then does anybody, thumbs up or thumbs down? Does thumbs up if you think it's okay to right now stay with the supervisory union policy that we already have in place for our district.
Okay, Chris, Beth is good. Bill's up. Nancy's up. Yeah, that looks like a majority. Amy, you okay, Amy?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. You like the Addison policy, didn't you?
Well, no, there's just a number of things that, yeah, I'm abstaining.
Okay. That was clearly a majority.
Okay. Then I think that for now,
We'll keep it off the agenda until we're ready.
we can certainly return to it. Just very quickly, the exploratory planning team, we had a call or VidCon with Jan Willie, and who has, for those who aren't familiar with her, she's had lots of experience in systems setups, lots of experience with teacher training, and I served with her on the pre-K MTSS pilot testing program. And she said she would prefer a group of 8 or 9. She's actually sounded pretty eager to work with us, and that's pretty much where. Am I leaving anything out?
No, I think that was a good summary. So we're going to pull that team together here in the next few weeks, and and try to get started. So or restarted. I think that was good, Elizabeth, and I was glad she said yes.
Yeah. So resignations and retirement. We have Karen Townsend. Really?
Yeah. Tiffany, do you want to speak to these?
Yeah, sure. I have two of them that are on there, I believe. We'll start with Karen. So sad to see her go. Karen was the school nurse for many years, and then 3 years ago switched from the nursing position to teaching health for middle and high school students. She has since decided to get back into being a school nurse and recently accepted a position at Lebanon. Unfortunate we didn't have a nursing position available at school because definitely hard to see her go. And she just wanted to make it clear too that Windsor is really, it holds a very special place in her heart. So it was a really difficult decision for her to actually leave. So I just wanted to put that out there for the board. The second resignation we have is Patrick Gordon. He has been a first grade teacher at Windsor for 5 years now. He was a very active member of our school leadership team and of the union. He sat in negotiations the last, maybe all 5 years that he's been there. He has accepted a teaching position over in the Norwich area. And again, shared a very heartfelt letter of resignation. He has a new family, and it just was a logical move for him, but again, a hard decision to leave Windsor. So he thanks the board and the community for everything and the support for all the time that he's been with us.
Yeah, Tiffany's kind, though. It was also a $20,000 salary increase, so
I was
it's so tough
not to nudge that in there, David.
Yeah, it's tough to compete with that Dresden school district, but yeah, he's got more money and a good job. So with a young family, it's hard to fight it. It's a little bit closer to home, not much. Tiffany, is there another one, Tiff? Did you?
Well, there's also Jennifer saying, also Mary Kay Cronin is retiring, and she's been with Albert Bridge for
a long time. Yeah, a long time.
As she says, first since 1989, Jennifer says. So first as a parent and then as a teacher. And she's been a mentor to lots of teachers. She has really been an early adopter of lots of different programs, and she's really ridden a bunch of waves, and she's everybody's kindergarten teacher. And we'll be sad she's been threatening to retire for a while, but we'll be sad to see her go. I'll take a motion to accept these
resignations
and
retirements.
So moved.
Looks like Nancy moved.
Second.
Yes.
Chris seconded.
With regret.
I'm just saying this so the recording picked it up. With regret. We usually get letters out to everybody.
So with regret, all of those in favor of accepting the two resignations and the retirement announcement, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay. I'd rather not, but aye.
Did you get the opposed, Elizabeth? Your mic is on, Elizabeth. Off, rather.
Is there anybody opposed to these resignations and retirement announcement?
Okay, that's unanimous.
Is it possible to oppose those?
What'd you say?
Is it even possible to oppose?
Well, you could oppose. Technically, you could oppose the resignations because letters of intent went out, but you can't really. No, it's contracts in this business go one way. Retirements, it's just really just a courtesy.
Okay. The principals reports. Did everybody have a chance to look at the principals reports?
Yes.
Does anybody have any comments about the two principals reports? I thought they were really thoughtfully done, and thank you both for giving such thoughtful reports. Did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes from the last meeting? Does anybody have any comments about the minutes?
I had a comment. I really don't want to make the meeting that much longer, but I just didn't understand everything that was in the minutes. And it took me some time to figure out most of it in relation to Sean's comment last SU. But on the bottom of page 5, they're talking about the inter-school policy. And they said something about it's tricky as Windsor is K through 12 and all West Windsor kids starting in grade 7 going to Windsor. And a lot of West Windsor kids could ask for this convenience. Then there's a new sentence dealing with K to 6 issue and not talking about sibling in school, period. I'm not sure what in the world that meant.
Amy?
I can clarify to some extent, I hope. So in kind of tricky sentences, what it means is that Windsor is a K-12 school. West Windsor kids from 7th grade on are going to Windsor. So a parent whose child is in 8th grade could request that their 5th grader also go to Windsor so they could drop off both kids.
Right.
Nice and convenient.
That was the convenience part of that.
Yeah.
But I agree, Nancy. I think it's worded very awkwardly, and I don't. I've had a conversation with Diane. I think what we're going to do, and we're going to test this, I think probably with this meeting, because I just spoke to her last week. This is the first meeting since that SU meeting. I think the minutes need a couple of readers, and she's got, she's including my administrative assistant. So we're gonna do some editing so they, we try to improve the syntax and the grammar and some of the spelling. I think what Diane tries to do is almost be like a court stenographer. She's just writing words while people are talking, and then afterwards to try to go back and make sense out of that. It doesn't always happen. I think they could be much more brief, to be honest with you.
Yes, I was amazed. 5 pages.
Yeah, it's
7 pages of.
It's too much, and I'm going to meet with Jen Tessia, my administrative assistant, and Diane Tessia. They tend to talk to each other quite a bit anyway, and we're gonna talk about a protocol and format for the minutes and how that editing will go back and forth. Yeah, so we'll hopefully we can make some improvements there. It's thorough, but it's not clear all the time.
Right.
David, I would be glad to help.
Yeah, if you, yeah, certainly. Yeah, I mean that would be great. Why don't? Because I know we sort of joked about that maybe it was at another time. I remember we talked about that, but yeah, if you want to get in that loop, that would be great. I just don't want you to overcommit.
If I can't do it, then I'll tell you that I can't do it.
Okay. And I assume you're talking about Mount Ascutney and SU only?
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds good.
So I'll take a motion to approve the principal's reports and the minutes from April 13th, including Nancy's comments.
So moved.
Okay. Beth
Second, Chris.
Okay. All of those in favor of approving the principal's reports and the minutes from April 13th, including Nancy's comments, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, it looks like the ayes have it. Regarding old business, I have a couple, just two quick, very quick things to mention. One is Portrait of a Graduate, which is picking back up on Thursday. That is it. That's the whole news regarding Portrait of a Graduate.
Yeah, it is. And actually, it's on Wednesday.
Right. We can report out on it at the
Yeah,
next
we
meeting.
will. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention it. And also, we totally dropped whatever happened to having a student board member. But
Yeah.
I think we should make sure that we don't lose track of that. I mean, it's an awkward and terrible time to try to do it, but if we want to be able to stay with it before the end of the school year, official or unofficial, we should figure out a way to do that, I think.
Yeah. Everybody has Tiffany's proposal.
Yeah.
So we worked off of that. So it's really just a matter of when the board wants to act on that. We can put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Yeah, I'd like to put it on the agenda for the next meeting. So for future agenda items, the student board member, the discussion of Portrait of a Graduate, and Jan Willie / the
Innovation team.
innovation team, economic status / budget. I mean, kind of a broad, very broad budget discussion.
And just a general COVID-19 update. I think that's good to keep that on there.
I sort of feel like there might be some legislative updates that might be coming up.
Yeah, we could roll it right into that. Yeah.
And also planning for next year.
Elizabeth, when is David's letter going out? Would that be gone by the next meeting?
Oh, definitely.
About
yeah.
this?
Yeah. And I got good feedback tonight. So, and I'm also, I had decided not to send it out till Wednesday after talking to a couple of board members privately. So I'll get some feedback from the Weathersfield board tomorrow night. And then I think we'll be fine to get it out with, with all of the caveats we mentioned tonight.
So all those things having been said, I'll take a motion to enter a short executive session. I'm very sorry that this is running so long, but we do still need to have an executive session.
Yeah, so what time is it? It is 8:55. Who makes the motion?
Bill Yates.
Bill did.
Second.
Nancy seconded.
So all those in favor of exiting for executive session, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay, so we're
Yeah, nobody opposed, it looks like.
Yeah.
So that means, and I don't think we need Tiffany or Jennifer or Angie. You guys can.
We do need Jennifer, don't we? Or no?
What's that?
Don't we need Jennifer?
I think
We may need Jennifer. My reason for executive session and Bill's reason was negotiations. I didn't know anything about Jennifer at this point. Did you?
You're still recording.
Yeah. Well, we're not in yet. We're just trying to decide why we're going in and who we need in there.
I had a topic that David, you and I were going to discuss.
Yeah, that was.
Lay it out in executive.
Yeah, that's negotiations. That's why I was going in. But Elizabeth, did you have another topic?
Yeah.
Was it a personnel issue?
It was a personnel issue. And
Okay.
so, if Jennifer could stay on, we could talk about that first, then she could leave and we could talk about the other.
Okay. So I'm going to stop.
Sounds like you don't need me though.
Yeah.
No, we do not need
Right.
Tiffany, correct?
Bye,
Elizabeth?
Tiffany.
All right.
Bye, Tiffany.
Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
Angie.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to stop recording. Hold on a second. We will just get to the record button and we
Let's make sure that